Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Great to see so many of you again. As you can tell, that picture on the screen is of me a few years ago when I was thinner and not quite so grey. Um, it's been a few months since we last spoke, and I've really enjoyed chairing the Adult Player Registration Council Oversight Group as a volunteer, like you are. You can probably tell what I do for a living, as it says, but I'm still very much involved in the game as a Hampshire referee. I do my best to be adequate. Not everybody necessarily agrees with that, but I try my hardest. And I'm still very much engaged at the RFU, trying to deliver this for the sake of the game. Since we last met, we've been back and forth to council to get their consent to move forward. Only last week, they signed off Regulation 13 that will tell the community game how we're going to do this, and Regulation 14 broadly how the professional game are going to do it as well. And that's a really interesting point. We shouldn't forget that when my daughter, well, no, my daughter's too young, but when my wife, who plays for Andover, does this next season, she'll be doing the same as the England players will be, and the Premiership and the Championship players, and your players at level 7 or 9 or 12. And I think it's really important to remember that what we've designed here is for the whole game, building on what our youngsters are doing already. So the regulations 13 and 14 are pretty much ready to go. We're just literally neatening them up and making them tidy so they can be published on the regulation page. And they're going to tell you exactly how we're going to do this. And regulation 13 at the beginning of the regulation is effectively why we're doing it and how it works before it goes into the full regulation as you'd expect. I'm really pleased that the women's game have come in line with the rest of with the men's game, and now our terminology is aligned. That's a really good step since we last spoke in February. And of course, since we last spoke in February, we've made the regulation even more simple to make this as easy to deliver and to understand. In terms of why we're doing it, of course, we haven't really changed that. We're doing this because effectively we're digitalizing a paper process. We've always needed to register to play rugby. Now we're asking everybody to register to play rugby, and we're doing that on a digital means. I think when I'm sort of speak about this in smaller groups and people say, so why? One of my starting points is wouldn't you like to know how many props you've got and how many scrum halves you've got and what ages they are and where they're coming from or where they're going to understand exactly the health of your game in your constituent body or in your club? And actually understanding who, what, where, and how is going to really help us manage that. I think it's going to be really easy to transition those age grade players who are now used to this in their third season into the adult game when effectively we're doing the same thing as they transition beyond 18 into the adult game. And of course, they'll expect it because they've already been doing it. I appreciate there's a changeover between parental consent and the individual themselves as they get to 18, but that's good. We're taking these children and age grade players through into the same journey. Of course, it is a means to communicate to the game. It's really hard to communicate to the game. You got our comms because you're here. But there's still so many of the people in the Rugby Gat family that we miss too often. And this will just be another means by which we can reach out to people and say, look, this is happening. Are you interested? And of course, this is just one part of our platform for rugby. It's an important part. It's the starting part. And it's the bit that everything else is going to really build from. And once we've got everybody through this process, I think we'll actually be able to take that step into the digital age. One more thing before I hand over to Ian is I was part of some player testing a couple of weeks ago. Some of the team in and Sam came down to see some Army rugby players and Aldershot. And I was really struck by, firstly, how simple it was for them, how much they were interested in what it could do, and actually how much they went, yeah, done, move on. They really didn't see it as an issue. And that was really reassuring. So look, thank you very much for being here. I'm here throughout. You might see me change out of this into something a bit more sporting, but otherwise, thanks to the rest of the team. I'll hand over to Ian.
Brilliant. Thanks, James. And nice little segue into our next part. So yes, as James alluded to, we did go to the army. We went all over the country, actually. So we did player usability testing on a number of functions around adult player registration, but we engaged with over 200 players across the country, everywhere right up in Northumberland and Newcastle area, all the way down to sort of Swanage, Wareham, Dorset area, and everywhere in between at various different levels of the game. And just some of the highlights are on the screen there. So positive feedback from all players and administrators that we went to those clubs, some really good positive feedback on the usability of it and how simple it was to do. We asked them to complete a number of tasks, and some of those was to create an account and to register. Now we timed creating an account and then registering to play. So in one as one loop, and the average time there was 2.5 minutes there, to 5 minutes to complete that. However, obviously, not everyone is going to be creating an account, because if you're already registered player this season, you will already have a GMS account. So you will just be logging in and registering to play. So the time taken to do that is probably going to be looking at, anything from 2 to 3 minutes really, just to do one task of register to play. And we got some constructive feedback from the game, which was brilliant. Stuff like buttons being moved to different places to make it easier when you're scrolling on a mobile, to some other bits like the wording on some aspects on buttons, just to make it a bit simple, a bit like wording from save to submit, that type of thing. So we got some really good constructive feedback there. And we actually, from all the club administrators that we showed it to when we're at these clubs, got good feedback around it reducing volunteer workload, because we're bringing it in one place, and visually you'll be able to monitor that in a better way as a club administrator, some of which we'll touch on a bit later. But we're reducing volunteer workload a lot there. So 16 clicks to 3 clicks for some aspects of the registration, which is a big improvement in saving time. But overall, a really good piece of work, and just fantastic to engage with the game and get everyone's thoughts, views. We had some brilliant sessions. We've tried it various different size clubs as well, and men and women were covered in that as well. So and obviously we did some stuff with the services, with the army, as James said earlier. So yeah, really good overall, and a good time. Cool. And the other bit that we're doing at the moment is, and some of you who may have attended some of my sessions in the past will know that we have Platform for Rugby user groups, and they are based on different roles in the game. So club management, you're off pitch; team and match management, you're on pitch roles; coaches are match officials, and CB and council members. And within these user groups, we are utilizing them to help give us feedback and on making improvements to the process. They've been every step of the way with us for the last two and a bit years, in looking at what we're doing and why we're doing it, and inputting every step of the way, giving us feedback, which has been really, really positive. And if you want to look who's in those user groups, you can go on englandrugby.com. I'll send the link out post session anyway, but you'll see the makeup of those user groups. We've got but we real user centric approach. Just moving on now to current activity, which is the email verification the activity that is going on at the moment. Obviously, we are making sure that everyone who is an existing registered player is logging into GMS and making sure that their email address is up to date. And whilst they're at it, making sure that they verify their email address in addition to that. Key message here, Matt, if you just move that along for me, is that players will need an up-to-date email address to log into GMS, or they need to be able to log into GMS, know they've got an email associated to it, make sure it's verified, and we're good to go. Now, probably just to highlight some good examples there. We've got 3 clubs there, Abingdon, Wimbledon and North Petherton, all doing it in different ways. But you've got North Petherton there who are identifying players that are yet to verify their email address. Some of the coaching team have been involved in that, sharing the graphs, that ready-made content that we've created out to the different various groups. And then they've got a membership sec following up personally with individuals as well. So it's a bit of a coordinated effort. And then you've got other examples there with Abingdon, clubs explaining to players the importance of it. People at different roles in the club are guiding players step by step and what they need to do, and are readily available to support. So you've got some good examples there. And then Wimbledon in the middle there, real club effort really, from off pitch and on pitch to get that moving. And I think Wimbledon have got 96% completion rate on that. So well done all those clubs. But just some examples to bring that to life to you. probably just to highlight, we know, and I've seen some of the questions coming through as well. We know there's the ongoing issue with emails being received from within the system. So if you're sending a verification email to players who have a Hotmail account, they may or may not be receiving them. Some are going through, some are not. If they're going through to junk and spam. This is a Microsoft issue at the moment. It's not just affecting us. It's not a GMS or an FSI issue. It's something that Microsoft have made a change to, and it's affecting other organisations as well at the NHS. Now, it's not ideal. We all know that, and we're getting daily updates, daily chasing Microsoft around when this will be resolved and updates. So as soon as we have anything to share with you, we will around when that will be fixed. But unfortunately, it's outside of our control. But we are obviously we'll share as soon as we know anything more. So I appreciate it's been a few questions on that. Just wanted to make you aware. Thanks, Matt. So I'm just going to hand over to Matt now. He's going to take you through the bits you've all been waiting for, and we've had lots of questions on over the last few months, and Matt and I have fielded many of these, but we're going to go through the key principles of adult player registration.
Thanks, Ian. Yeah, great to be with you all this evening. Thanks for so many of you coming on. It's really, really good. Yeah, pleased to be able to share some more detail, as James alluded to in his introduction. The council votes and then passing the regulations have allowed us now to start to bring to life the principles of adult player registration. Probably make no apologies really to say we're about to go through a lot of detail, and that detail will very much be around what adult player registration is. So we're going to look at certain scenarios and certain key principles within different levels, and I'll try as much as I can to bring these to life as possible. In terms of how, so in terms of the process of actually registering players, how players register, and what we mean by that is interacting with the technology and signing up to do that. That will come later and closer towards the summer. And those sessions you'll see towards the end of tonight's webinar, you'll see that there will be a lot of specific stakeholder groups who will be invited to sessions for that. The obvious ones to pull out there, of course, are players and club registrars. The platform for the sign up of registration is almost entirely built now. It goes into what is called end-to-end testing next week. Once that's finished, and we add in the new GMS themes, the thematic piece that we're adding in, it will then be ready to show everybody exactly what it will be looking like 1st of July onwards, and that's why we're booking in those sessions in for those stakeholder groups in June. So without further ado, we'll get into some of the key changes. Now we'll go through these step by step, so hopefully you can bear with us, and if you've got any questions, do keep them coming in, and the guys will stop me at particular parts if we need to cover. So the fundamental principle, and again, James has done many good segues and teed us up well tonight. Every single player will register to play at that club, to play at their club. And to give two kind of dramatic scales and hopefully capture everything in between, you'd then be looking at Joe Marler registering to play for Quins at the start of next season, right through to somebody who goes and plays for a full team and plays the last weekend of next season. Every single player, regardless of their level, the format that they play within our member clubs will be required to register with their club. Now, there'll be different types of registrations after that to meet the needs of the semi-pro and professional game, etc. And we'll break those down into the levels as we go further into the deck. So the V12 player registration module, so for those registrars on the webinar tonight, you'll be familiar with that. That's essentially how you register players now. That will be going. So we're pleased to say that one of the clicks and one of the things that we've had consistent volunteer burden feedback on for a number of years now is you will not need to log into GMS and then click on player registration, then go into a different module, then be logged out of GMS and then have to log into V12. All of the technology which you will get to see from the end of May onwards will be completely and fully embedded within GMS. You will not be able to, you will not need to go into different modules and sign into different parts of the game management system to register players. Players, very, very similar indeed to age grade registration, will renew their registration each season. So these are the key changes for every single player right across the game. Important to note that time test that Ian pointed out, which was both account creation and player registration, and again, just to repeat what Ian said, the vast majority of players will not need to do the account creation because they'll already have an account. They won't need to do that each year. This is not a full re-registration. It's renewing their registration and just them saying to their club and to the game, yes, I'm still here. I still want to play at this club. Count me as an active player and supply all information that we want to try and keep that player as active as we possibly can. And then calling out specifically as we go through the different areas of the game, we've introduced, or we will be introducing some more flexibility at the lower levels to better meet the needs of our players in the game and to reflect that understanding of that more, some people call it the more social players, the more casual, the more occasional players. And as you can see there, referring to the second point, all formats and all levels, the non-contact, the specific non-contact registration element. So we're not talking about people here who come and do 10 to 15 minutes warm-up touch before they do a contact session. We're talking about people who play non-contact rugby. That element of the adult player registration will be launched in April next year. And that is to coincide with what is essentially their start of their season, just like what we're doing with contact rugby from 1st of July onwards. So into the levels then, and I am going to go through step by step. It's quite hard to put all of the detail on the slide. So we've gone for levels, which is typically what people are most familiar with. So what we're talking about here, men's level 4 and above. So we're talking about men's Premiership, men's Championship, National 1 and National 2. And we're talking about PWR, Premiership Women's Rugby as well. So, and really important to call out, all other contracted players. So if you have a player who's playing, let's say, Regional 2, Level 6, or any other level of the game that isn't included at 4 and above and 1 for women, then they will also need to follow this registration process because they're classed as a contracted player. Again, you'll see this on all of the levels as we go through them. The player will first register to play at their club. The club registrar will then submit an application to the RFU registrar or an RFU registrar. And that's one of, again, many people on the webinar this evening will be familiar with our registrations team. That is somebody who's based at Twickenham typically, and we'll have a look at that registration. You are typically talking about we're definitely talking about contracted players as well as those who are playing more typically in the professional and semi-pro elements of the game. And those registrations, so the player, once they've registered to play at their club, the registrar would then accept that player's registered to play at the club, and then they would essentially ask the RFU registrar to make that player eligible to play at those levels. The 7-day wait period, which is in place now, will remain, and we're calling out what we think are the key principles here, the ones that we've typically had most questions on. So if something is not on here that you would expect it doesn't necessarily mean that it's changed and isn't there anymore, but we are trying to pull out the key principles that are as much as we can this evening. Again, noting what I said earlier about still so much more detail to come further down the line. Expedited registration will still be available. So for those who, for whatever reason, need a player to be available inside that 7-day wait period, then expedited registration will be available. The difference will be, and again, you'll see this in June, is how they achieve that will be when they will be through GMS rather than the kind of offline process in terms of how it works now. And any transfers or loans at these levels will be initiated by the applicant club. And again, that will be done with inside GMS. So again, highlighting that in green to call that out as a new process. People have heard that the eligibility for players to be able to play for more than one club. Yes, that is being introduced, but that's further down the levels. So just to call out and be clear, players at these levels will only be able to register and play for one club at any one time. Save, of course, what is still in place now. And again, I've listed some of those scenarios there. Save a loan, EAP, so that's England Academy players for those clubs at these levels who are familiar with taking advantage of that facility. University and Student Services Pass, that will remain. Again, the process in terms of how to do that will become clearer when we show people the technology in June. And of course, that will still be in place at men's level 2 and 4 only. And those are the scenarios where they would potentially have more than one club. But typically, as it works now, those players will be registering and playing for one club only. Excuse me. They will be able to play for all of their club sides. So there is nothing within player registration that is going to interfere, and neither should it, with club's own selection policies. So if you've got a men's team that's playing, let's say, National 1, that's where their first team play, and let's say their third team plays at Counties 3, Level 9, or their fourth team plays in a merit league, Should you want to, you can select that player at any single team within your club. Granted, people would sometimes call out particularly some potential core values there in terms of playing contract players further down the pyramid and further down the teams, but there is nothing within the implementation of the new adult player registration that will interfere whatsoever with clubs and their selection policy. However you do that now and continue to want to do it in the future is entirely up to you. 3 clubs max in 1 season, as it is now. That is not changing, but probably a key one to call out. And when we get further down the levels, you'll see, and you may have heard, that there'll be a retrospective registration option. That won't be a facility that is gifted to this level of the game. Everybody who registers or to become eligible to play at these levels, you must be registered within the constraints, as you would expect it now, a 7-day wait period, etc. For example, expedited registration, etc. The regulation that this part of the game will come under, James alluded to, will be Regulation 14. So everything within this part of the game, so that's men's level 4 and above, women's level 1, plus all other contracted players. Really important to call that out. The regulation that those players within these levels of the game will be following will be Regulation 14. All players, as we've already said, will need to be appropriately registered as they are now. And there will be no change at these levels of the game on the applications of, the application of the sanctions framework. So recognizing this level of the game that everybody must be completely registered up front, exactly how you would expect it now. Moving on. So we're now into men's level 5 to 8 and women's level 2 to 4. So to call those names of the leagues out for those who might not be familiar. So men's level 5 is Regional 1. Men's level 6 is Regional 2. Men's level 7 is Counties 1. Men's level 8, unsurprisingly, is Counties 2. In the women's game, level 2 is Championship 1. Level 3 is Championship 2. And level 4 is National Challenge 1. So those are the names of the actual levels of the competition. Again, you'll see this on all of the levels as we go through them tonight. The player will register to play at their club. The club registrar then completes the registration process for that player. And what this does is essentially, for want of a better word, locks that player into their club to play for one club only. Important to call out, there will be no further approval needed unless that player is contracted. So if I was to go and play at Regional 1, and I wish I did play at Regional 1 back in the day, I would register to play at my club. The club registrar would see I've made an application to play. They would accept that. And then the club registrar would complete some small additional steps, which would then essentially lock that player into playing for that club only. They would not need to submit any registrations to the RFU, but that additional step the club registrar takes will ensure that that player is playing for that club only. The 7-day wait period would remain as it does now. Expedited registration, just as the previous levels, will also be available, albeit a slightly different process in GMS. And I keep teeing that up. That will absolutely be things that will come back to registrars and many other groups that you'll see towards the end, from the end of May. A new process with the similar one, the applicant club will initiate the transfer and the loan. And that will be done again within GMS, and it'll be the applicant club that wants to take that player in. So it'll be those that will apply for that, and of course the existing club will be notified. One club only, as I've said there, in terms of that extra registrar step. Again, save loans, university student passes, etc. They will be able to play for all of their club sides. So just to call that out specifically again, if you had a women's team who was their first team was level 3, so let's say they were playing Women's Championship 2, and they had a second team in the Honoria Series or in National Challenge 3. If you want to be registered to play at this level, they'll be able to play for all of those teams as per your selection process, and indeed taking into account the regulations of the game that will cover the specific levels. 3 clubs max in 1 season, again, which is the case this season. No retrospective registration option at these levels. So again, everybody must be registered up front. Transfer deadline remains in this one, so you may have heard some people talking about the transfer deadline going. It is going at different levels of the game, but not this level. So the transfer deadline remains. And if people want to be registered to play at these levels, they must do so before that transfer deadline comes in. And there'll be no borrowing at this level. Now, the men's game are probably used to that anyway, but then this is mainly referring to the women's game, where currently in National Challenge 1, you are able to lend and borrow players. That will be coming out of these levels of the women's game. The regulations that covers this level of activity is Regulation 13. So that's the new regulation. Again, important to call out unless those players are contracted, and then they would follow Regulation 14. All players need to be appropriately registered, before the game takes place, and therefore, of course, as the level previously, so they can be added to the electronic match card, which will remain mandatory at these levels. And an appreciation as we start to come down the pyramid that Regulation 13 is new, and we are committed to supporting the game to getting up to speed with this. So it's important to call out that it is regulation that players must be registered in advance, but also with a nod towards this will be a new regulation for the game to get used to. So when we start to get more towards the date in the summer where the regulations get published, you can expect to be incorporated into some certain sessions, some approaches that might be taken to support the game with the implementation of this new regulation, and a recognition there, of course, that the sanctions framework will remain unchanged, but will be utilised in a way to help us achieve a supportive approach. Again, recognising that this part of the game has a few more changes than the levels above. 2 more slides to go. Hope you're still with me. So men's level 9 and below, and women's level 5 and below. And again, to call out this specifically, spend a little bit of time on this. Men's level 9 is counties 3. So therefore, men's level 10 would be counties 4, and so on and so forth, where those leagues are in the country, because they're not across all of the country, but they are in some places. And when we say below, we mean everything else below that. And that means merit leagues, it means merit tables, it means CB Cup competitions, it means friendlies, it means everyone playing contact rugby at our member clubs below these levels. It means absolutely everything, and that's the same for women as well. So for women, level 5 is National Challenge 2. Level 6 is currently the base and the foundation of the RFU leagues for women, which is National Challenge 3. And then the development of the more entry-level competition for women, many of you will know as Inner Warrior Series. That's the level that we mean by these. And again, and also any women's county cups, any women's friendlies, those types of levels are what we're talking when we refer to below. Same as all the other levels, the player registers to play at the club. And a different exercise here, and a recognition of the needs of the players at these levels, and indeed the clubs, is the club registrar will do a simple accept or decline. And if they accept, then that player is immediately registered and available to play. And you've seen how long we've done with the player testing in terms of how long it takes to sign up. So you literally could have a situation here where a player could take 60 seconds to register a club. The registrar says, yes, we accept that. That player is then immediately registered to be able to play at these levels and below that are demonstrated here. There will be no 7-day wait period, and you'll see a lot of green in this, which is emphasizing the changes. No expedited registration process is needed because the registration is almost instant and immediate. Now, at these levels, spend a little time on this. They can play for up to 2 clubs, so they can register and play for 2 clubs at any one time. So an example for this could be you could have a female player who's playing a National Challenge 2, they could register for a club there, and they can go and register for another club playing National Challenge 3. Same for the men. You could have a male player registered to play Counties 4 somewhere in the southwest, and they could also go and register for another club down the road and then turn out for that vets team once a month. So a little bit more flexibility, again, with that nod towards these levels of players and indeed teams within clubs that probably would benefit from a much more flexible approach. Important here, as we've mentioned in the other levels, that the players, once they're registered for the clubs, they're then able to completely play up and down all of their clubs. Important to note here that if players are going to play higher, they will essentially need to move up their level and their registration type. And I'll give those examples here. So if you've got a men's team that's playing at Counties 3, that's where their first team is. That's essentially the highest they're ever going to play. You don't need to do anything else. Almost instant registration, they can play for that team. If you've got, let's say, a men's 3rd team that are playing at Counties 3, and you registered a player to play in that team or at that club and to represent that team, and you think that that's all that player is ever going to represent at your club, which is fine. My level of rugby, I'm used to that. Third team was something I aspire to. Then that player would only ever need this type of registration. If you then had, let's say, a second team playing in counties 1, so that's level 7, if you wanted to make that player eligible to play in that second team, you wouldn't need to do the level up registration type that we showed on the previous slide. And it's important to note that at that point, that player, if they are registered for that second club, and of course, club players don't have to take advantage of that. We hope they all do, but they don't have to. Then they would lose the ability to play for that second club. They would then be locked in essentially into that club and again be able to play for all of the teams within that club. But if this is the highest level that they're only ever going to play at, then they can stay at this level and then have that second club registration. So transfers will be different at this level as well. So the player will self-transfer themselves. So they will go into the system. And again, we're teasing people with it, but you will be able to say that in June, we promise. The players will self-transfer themselves, but really important, in line with regulation, the clubs will be notified almost immediately that that player is wanting to self-transfer. And within that notification going to clubs will be guidance in terms of what to do, whether that's something if they want to do actively. So, for example, they feel that that player shouldn't be moving for whatever reason linked to regulation. Typically, some people do that if there's potentially a debt owed or a disciplinary issue. There will be clear steps within that notification to clubs outlining what it is that they would need to do to potentially dispute that transfer. Or if there's a passive kind of process that the clubs want to take, so maybe they're a bit busy, they don't want to approve a transfer, then that will just become at a point in time in the very near future, like a few days later, that will become active, that transfer, and that player will transfer for the next club. No transfer deadline. So there will be no transfer deadline at this level. And again, that is to recognise that these levels of the game will require that flexibility. As you would imagine, it would be a tough ask and a tough sell. Not that it's something that we would want to take to market, that if somebody wants to go and help a third team or fourth team out in April so a team can finish the season off, that players at these levels can't do that because there's a transfer deadline. There will be no transfer deadlines at these levels. It's important to note. One question which might be on some people's minds is, what if a player comes into this kind of level of registration after the transfer deadline? Can they then be registered up? And the answer to that is no. So you can't get anybody to come in at this level of registration in, let's say, third week in March, and then the registrar would not be able to turn that registration if that player was coming in as a transfer to then be registered up. Retrospective registration is available, and when the regulations are published, you will see that it's likely that we will go for a fixed time and day of the week by when all retrospective registrations will need to be completed. And I'll give you an example of that. Again, recognizing the more flexible nature of this game. If you've got a player who just hasn't registered or becomes available really late in the day, dashing from work, we don't want that player being prevented from taking to the pitch because of registration. Get that player doing their activate stuff and getting warmed up appropriately, of course, but then think about registration later, because it's really important that that player gets onto the pitch. So they could become available really late in the day. You don't need to be registering people before 12 o'clock on a Friday day in any expedited way. And I hope you can see that running through this theme or this stream of registration. So an example would be they become available really late in the day, Friday night, Saturday morning, even at half time. They're coming from work, they've finished early, they want a game. Get them on the pitch and then sit them down in the clubhouse after or the next day and say, right, let's get you registered and let's get you signed up now. There will be no limit. Yes, Ian.
Yeah, just a couple of themes coming through just around this section of the game, really. Just one myth, can we just debunk now, just around the 100 players registration? Do you mind just?
Yeah. So yeah, that's thanks, Ian. It's we did get a few questions on that. So the 100 player limit was removed a few seasons ago, so that is not in place. There is no constraints in terms of the numbers of players that you can register at your club. I think I'd need to check, but I think off the top of my head that was either 2 or 3 seasons ago that was removed. So yeah, that's not in place. Thanks for flagging, Ian. Is there anything else we want to focus on right now, Ian? Or should we?
I'll let you go through the rest of the slide, and then there'll be a few more.
Thank you. Nearly there. So Regulation 13 activity, unless contracted, highly unlikely at these levels, but that facility is there, I guess, if clubs want to take advantage of that. So Regulation 13 is what this part, this area of the game will come under. All players need to be appropriately registered. And again, as you can see with the language that we're using here, any kind of sanctions, regulations, whatever they might be, they will be very much they will be very much in line with the recognition that there are a lot of changes. It's essentially a new registration type. There will be a lot of new elements to registration coming at these levels, rightly so, because it does help get more games get played and helps players play a little bit more flexibly. So in terms of any regulations and sanctions, like I say, you'll see a little bit more information on that as we head towards the summer, but very much a recognition that this will be very new for a lot of people. And proportionally, the regulations and sanctions will be applied very much in that way.
Matt.
So the last one, yes.
Just on that then. So a couple of just questions just come in. So if a player can register for 2 clubs at level 9 and below, can they play league matches? For example,
yes,
Club A plays County 3 and Club B plays County 4.
Yeah, yes, they can. So yeah, level 9. So yes, they can play RFU League Rugby where those apply. So most of the country at least goes down to level 9, not quite all. Some go down as far as I think level 11 this season. So that will be counties 3, 4, and 5, unsurprisingly. So yes, they will be able to play for 2 clubs at those levels and in the same league should they wish.
And a few just around electronic match card. Will social teams be required to do electronic match card? That's first question, probably first.
Great. So really happy to pick that one up. So where electronic match cards are in place now will be where they will be in place next season as well. Electronic match cards are such a valuable source of information to the RFU for us to be able to make a lot of key decisions on how we support the game. And there is a principle and a view from some that it was probably time to roll that out right across the game. What the decision the council oversight group took, which I think is absolutely the correct one, shared by James, is that making those mandatory at all levels is quite a big change to make, accepting that the changes that are being made in registration anyway. So there will be no extension from a mandated point of view of electronic match cards. They will still be mandatory in all RFU leagues and cups. But really important to call out that we are seeing a lot more merit leagues and clubs playing friendly games that are optionally taking advantage of electronic match cards. And that's great to see that clubs are doing that. But just to be clear, electronic match cards will not be in regulation outside of any RFU leagues or cups. But we do hope people take up the functionality as many clubs are continuing to do on an increasing basis each season.
Cool. And there's a number of clubs that are saying just, they've got a third team. Often they have players from other local clubs guest in to make up a full team. Do they have to register?
Yeah, so the principle that applies here. So yeah, I'm familiar with guesting. Before this role, I was in competitions for a few years, so very familiar with guesting. And guesting is essentially blended within this level of registration. I hope you can see that coming through and continue to see that coming through over the next coming months. Essentially, fundamentally, every player will be required to register to play. So if you do get a player who's coming along and guesting for a week, then as per regulation, that player would be expected to register to play rugby. They can do that via signing that up as their second club. They could do that as a self-transfer potentially. And we recognise fully, and I'm sure you can see it in terms of a nod to the language under regulations here. We accept that there's a lot of changes for people to get used to here. And you can see how many things are highlighted here. If it's green, it means it's a change. So there's a recognition that this will take some time for the game to get used to. Just like we saw in the age grade game, which has taken a couple of seasons for people to fully get their head around. So the principle will always remain that players must register to play for the team and their club that they're representing. But we do accept that this is going to take a little time for people to get used to, including both of our clubs and indeed our players, of course.
Cool. And just one more before we move on. Can a player register for 2 clubs at level 9 in the same league? Could that happen?
Yes, they can. Yes, they can.
There we go. All good. We'll cover some more in a bit.
Yeah, and it's important to state. I can understand how how and why that question has come in. Of course, this will be reviewed. You know, this is not just going to be implemented on the 1st of July this year and then just left and say, right, we'll see you in a few years. This is a real big, major change, one that we think is definitely going to benefit the game from a number of aspects, particularly in the longer term and indeed in the short term, volunteer burden as well being one of those things. And this will be reviewed. And if there are things that need to change in future seasons, then any council oversight group that's appointed, any councillors on our subcommittees which will oversee this work will work through those potential changes and make changes if need be. Thanks, Ian. I'll move on to the last one if that's okay. Appreciate there might be a few people on here from universities and services. Of course, we've got one in James at least. So just going to talk through quickly here, and rather than highlight everything green and try and dazzle people, I've just highlighted rather the title here because this is all new. At the moment, our member universities, so a member university would be a university side who is a member of the Student Rugby Football Union and therefore by default of the member of the Rugby Football Union, and our services teams, they will also be registering to play within their teams. And there are just a couple of changes worth highlighting in particular. Like the slide before, that club registrar will just simply accept or decline that player registration, and that player is good to go. They will then be immediately registered and available to play, as you would expect. No 7-day waited period, no need for any expedited registration. And the key change on this one is that anybody registering for a university or a services, an out-and-out services club, so important to call out that this would be clubs not in the RFU leagues. So we're not talking about Loughborough students here, for example, or anything like that. We're talking about genuine university clubs and services teams. They can register for multiple university teams and services. There's no restrictions on that. And I'll just spend a little bit of time explaining why, because I'm sure some of you can appreciate that in larger universities in particular, where they've got intramural programs, if they want to register for those intramural society teams, then they'll be able to do so. There'll be no restriction. In collegiate universities, Oxford, Cambridge, Durham, for example, they will be able to register for a books side, and then also register potentially for their college. And the same applies for services for those who come out of whether they play for regiments, battalions, representative divisions, those types of things. There'll be no restriction for them to be able to register for all of those. So a bit more flexibility here, but again, must emphasise that is non-RFU leagues only. And we are working, and we continue to work with books, as we have done for a long time on this. Their regulations, when they come out of the summer, there could be some restrictions within their higher teams, but that will be made clear to those universities in August. The retrospective registration is available, and again, we just need to nail with books what they would like to see, particularly in their higher end teams, when they send out their regulations and competition information, typically in August. So the retrospective registration option will be there for those teams as well. No limit on the clubs is what I said, so they can register for multiple ones. And another real important one, this does not impact on any of their other club registrations. So again, I'll give a dramatic example. You could have a player who's registered at the level above this, arguably at level 9, counties 3, or they could be registered at Nat 1, National 2 in the men's game, Championship 2 in the women's game. They could also go and register for 15 university, intramural, collegiate sides, university teams, wherever that might be. That will not impact upon any of their club numbered registrations. Again, highlighting, as long as the teams and clubs and universities and services that they're registering for in here are not in the RFU leagues. Regulation, this will come in the Regulation 13 unless contracted, which is highly unlikely, but important to call that out, I guess. All players will need to be appropriately registered. That's the theme, obviously, running through all of this. And again, with a big nod to the level and the slide before, it will be regulation for these players to register to play if they're a member of the RFU. But again, a nod that this is really quite new, and this is going to take some while to embed fully, we appreciate. So important to call out that it is regulation, but any kind of application of the regulation and any sanctions in particular, they'll be proportionate, and they'll be understanding of the fact that a lot of this is new to these sides. Ian, I'll pause there for a second to see if there's any more key themes coming through on the questions. And while I do so, I'll definitely grab a drink. Bear with me.
Yeah, no worries. Just a couple of bits before we move on. Just to clarify, just is the process of signing for multiple clubs the same for a university student wishing to play and sign on for a local club?
So for the player, yes, it would. Yes, is the answer. The difference calling it out there is that a student could continuously register for other university organisations. Like I said, typically collegiate sides, intramural. But in terms of the experience for the player, they will find the organisation and sign up in the same way, and the registrar will carry out exactly the same activity. They either do a quick accept or decline, and they're good to go.
That's cool. And just a couple of people just asking around, is there changes around the student pass?
Yeah, so in terms of where the student and services pass apply, so just to, if people aren't familiar with those, so we have in place what was called, unsurprisingly, a student and services pass ability, and that is for service personnel and students where eligible to be able to get a second registration at the levels where typically there isn't one. So to call those out, we're talking men's level level 3 and below. And we are talking women's level 3 to level 8 and women's level 2 to level 4. What we're looking at here are people who, I'll give an example where you could have somebody who's playing for Tyndale, just up the road from me, down in Corbridge, yet they're at university in Exeter. They could apply for a second registration in Exeter under a student pass where they'll be able to go and play for another club that's in the RFU leagues. That's in place now, but it's very clunky, very offline. I've done it for my club, so for those that are on the call will recognise that will all be embedded in GMS and will be done electronically. And it's the same for services. So again, you could have a player who's, let's say, playing for somebody down in Essex. They get deployed to Albemarle Barracks up the road, and then they might then want to go and play for Nova Castrians up in Newcastle. That are providing they are eligible and they need to demonstrate eligibility, they'll be able to get that second club attached to their registrations, and they'll be able to play for both.
No worries. Cheers, man. I'm just conscious of time. We'll come back to some more questions in a bit. We'll just get through the rest of the information we'd love to share with you. So just to remind everyone, really, in case you didn't see the first one, the resources that we have in place to support you. So you will have, obviously, there's a lot of you on here, so you would have seen the communications that have been going out to the game around adult player registration. That can be seen on social media. It can also be seen regularly in the community game update. And if you're not seeing the community game update for whatever reason within your club, you can see it on Community Rugby Help whenever you so wish. And there is a tile on there on our Community Rugby Help page for adult player registration with all the information that you possibly could need around adult player registration at this point in time. So there's links to the CGU in there, there's links to the webinar, there's links to all our ready-made content. We have our YouTube channel on Platform for Rugby YouTube with a adult player registration playlist. On here, we will have, as we move forward, we will have how-to videos to support administrators, registrars, etc., as well as players. They are going to be developed over the next few months. But if you have a look at our Platform for Rugby YouTube channel now, you will see there's an adult player registration playlist. There is a resource there to support you around email verification. There also is that's the place where we save these webinars. So have a look at that Platform for Rugby YouTube. Make sure you subscribe yourself. You won't miss out. And then we have also got to support the current task at the moment, which is around the email verification. We do have a data session that is available with my GMS support trainer team, who will then take you through what's required. If you need a bit further information and you need someone to guide you through that process, they're available, and you can access that via englandrugby.com. Again, the links to all this stuff are on Community Rugby Help. And currently, we've got the local delivery team, so RFU full-time staff who work in the field are currently in the midst of a bit of a focus week now around contacting clubs to see if they're getting on with the email verification task. Okay, any resource or signposting needed. And then we've got our ongoing user feedback on a regular basis with our platform for rugby user groups, where we're testing different bits, giving feedback, which is really crucial. And we've got our webinar program, which you're on now, and we have a further few engagement activities coming up, which Matt's going to guide you through now, and the next steps of what else we have coming.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. So mentioned it a few times tonight, as I've quenched my thirst a little bit there after doing a fair bit of speaking this evening. We hope that a lot of the detail that you've had tonight has gone somewhere to quenching your thirst for detail, which is great to see because it shows good, strong engagement, and we continue to get that thirst for detail coming from the game, and it's really, really encouraging to see. And thank you for keep bringing that to our attention, and please keep doing that. We recognise that this is very much, as I said at the start of my piece, that this is what adult player registration is, but in terms of how to do it, you know, typically in the technology and maybe why you would do certain registrations, we recognise that a good number, and this isn't an extensive list on here, we recognise that there is a good number of dedicated groups that we will be doing further engagement sessions with from around about mid to the end of May right through to the end of June. Calling out, for example, there are organising committees. We're getting those sessions booked in with them all already. Premiership, because they obviously need to have a look at this, and we've got a session online with them tomorrow night with the team managers from the Premiership side, from the men, and the women. The Championship will be done in a few weeks' time. We'll be putting on at least 2 sessions in June for club registrars. Obviously, a real crucial group here because there are some key changes for those people. So we want to support those obviously as much as what we can. And when we talk about 2 sessions in June, that won't be it. That will be very much taking people through the technology, the process, the registration types. And then, of course, over the summer, there will be continued support that we will look at on a drop-in basis and anything that we potentially need to react to. And then also another key group, as these are all key groups, of course, is what some people call our non-RFU league competition organisers. So they're typically organising committees, usually constituent body CBs, who will organise things like merit leagues, merit tables, where we get thousands of games played in each year. Recognising this is a reasonable change for those organising committees and those volunteers. So all of these groups that you see on here and more will be getting specific invites to sessions from around about the end of May right through to the end of the June, and we'll be busy getting in front of those guys, some face to face, some will be online, again taking you through more of the how, so the processes within GMS to show you what registration and registrar activities, for example, will look like. I'll hand you back to Ian to close up.
Excellent. Just conscious there's a few questions come in just around what happens if you don't verify your email address by the 1st of July. Well, ultimately, you need a unique email address to log into GMS. The player needs to be able to log into GMS from the 1st of July. If they don't do it till later than that, then if there are any issues with their email address or accessing it, then that's going to be a bit more difficult, put a bit more time pressure on getting that done ahead of games, etc. So, you know, ultimately, that's why we're doing this task, you know, trying to get clubs and players to push this now so that come 1st of July onwards, we see a smoother process with people being able to log in and be able to register to play, rather than not knowing they've got an account, not knowing they've got an email address already on there that's wrong, that's like 10 years old, and they can just do that. So, you know, there's a number of questions just around the verification piece there. It is important, but they do need to have a unique email address. Players will need to log in. And just to be really clear, we're focusing currently on existing registered players only. And that's because there's a large number of them at the moment. We will communicate around when to target your players that have never been on GMS, they haven't got a GMS account now, and they need to log in, because we've got some exciting stuff to share with you in the future that will be an improved process around that part. So just wanted to call some of that coming out. So next webinars then. So we've got 10th of June will be for a general webinar as like this format for club administrators, so more general. So make sure you got that date in your diary, 7 p.m. you will be sent a link to that after once it's set up, and probably it'll be off the back of this. Everyone who's registered for this, you will get a link for it. The 17th of June will be a session for players around, any players that want to know what they have to do and you want to signpost them to, we'll run that session. It's optional for that. They don't have to attend it, obviously, but just another space for those players that just want to know a bit of detail, know what they need to do as a player, and we'll take them through that and make sure that they know. So it might be good if you maybe had your team captains from your clubs attending that, people who are organising those social teams at the club. Any sort of players there to that would be key, and then spreading that message amongst the players across the clubs. It might be, have a think about that, guys. When you go back to your clubs, think about those key people at your clubs that could drive that. We've all got them at our clubs. The person who does the messaging, the ringing round, who's in contact with those players. That's the type of people we'd want from a player's perspective on that session. And then, as Matt has alluded to in that previous slide, there'll be specific role-based support sessions for the game throughout mid-May to June. And this is not an exhaustive list, but these are the ones that we'll be focusing on throughout this key time, mid-May through to June. Some will be online, some will be face-to-face. Obviously, there's a lot of club registrars across the country, so that's going to be online. So there'll be some key information and a chance for you to just double check on the information, know where it is, know what you're doing ahead of that July piece. But there's the key dates for your diary now. We have 2 minutes remaining, so I'm just going to double check we've got no common more questions coming in. But thank you so much for all the questions. I know Sam and I have been desperately trying to get through as many as we can, typing them back to you, which has been really, really good. But a couple of things that have just coming up now, just to finish off that the session. What happens if a player has an out-of-date email address? Well, you need to contact that player, get their up-to-date email address, and then you can amend that accordingly as an administrator. If you need guidance on that, it's all on Community Rugby Help. Make sure you're jumping on there and having a look at the information that is out there. Cool. Yeah. Another common one coming through, all the sessions will be recorded. So the 10th of June will be recorded. If you're away or you can't make it, etc., it will all be recorded. It will be all on Platform for Rugby YouTube channel. If you missed the first webinar that we've done, that's on the YouTube channel. You can have a look at that as well. So please do have a look. But thanks for all the engagement tonight. It's been a brilliant session. Thanks to all the presenters and everyone who's been involved in this webinar, but more importantly, thanks to you volunteers for giving up the time to understand all this information, get heads around it a bit further. This recording will be available soon, over the next week, so we'll contact you once it's ready. I'll even drop a note onto the GMS Facebook group to make sure everyone is aware on there, but everyone who's registered tonight will get direct access to the link because we will share it. So thanks for your time. Matt's happy because Newcastle are about to kick off, so we're finished on time at 8 o'clock. So brilliant. Thanks everyone.
Thanks everyone. Good night.